so welcome to the Unconnoisseur channel. Today we are in a very special location with a really special individual, and I want to take some time before we talk about our album to find out a little bit of the history. I want to introduce you to my left-hand side, Bob Jacobsen, past president of
Starr-Gennett Foundation.
There we go, Starr-Gennett Foundation. We're fortunate enough to be here in the historic Starr Piano, one of the Starr Piano buildings that's still remaining. And you'll see that in the background here as Bob and I begin to talk. We're just in a great location that's currently just 2 stories remaining. It used to be a 6-story building. So, Bob, you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Well, my name is Bob Jacobsen. I'm a past president of the Starr-Gennett Foundation, currently on the board. And the foundation's been around since 1991, and the Walk of Fame was put in 2007. And we currently have about 30 artists in our Walk of Fame, and I've been involved for the last 15 years or so.
Fantastic. And after walking it, I understand there's more room for more artists.
Yes, yeah, there are, and there's a few medallions around town in the city building and the historical museum, and that are not yet in the walk.
Okay, and I forgot to mention that this is the historical Richmond, Indiana, and so Matt and I in a little bit will be going to see the historical downtown and one of the medallions in the city.
In the city building.
City building.
Yeah, and a piano. You can see a nice
yes.
piano.
Yeah. And most of you have already seen Matt's video about, or pictures about his listening to the organ being recorded in
the Reed Center. Yeah, that's a historic old Presbyterian church.
And that was Dolby Atmos surround sound recording.
Yeah, that's a friend of ours, but Matt knows more about it than I do.
Okay, we'll quiz him on that. But while we've got Bob, I wanted to ask about the history. Some things that may not be in books, some things that, we got a great history lesson in the Walk of the Medallions, but what are things that we don't know?
Well, Indiana is part of the Northwest Territory, included Ohio and Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and it was opened up in 1806, and so the Richmond is actually a little older than the state of Indiana, which was incorporated in 1816. Ohio's a little bit older than Indiana, and we're a little bit older than Illinois. But we were founded by Quakers from North Carolina. There's a big Quaker center, and Quakers moved here for a number of reasons. One, the land was cheaper and so on. And they did not believe in slavery. So Quakers early on did have a few slaves, but they released their human bondage and left the territory, came up to this new open area, and Indiana was where they settled. And there was a number of blacks that were followed them up to Indiana. So
for the freedom,
agriculture, and start a new life. Yeah, and so Richmond started as a Quaker settlement. In fact, Earlham College, which is here in Richmond, is still a Quaker institution. Yeah,
that should have rang a bell. We see the Amish around Fort Wayne all the time, and that would have been part of that Quaker.
Yeah,
or
seeking religious freedom.
And
moving west and continuing their lifestyle or life.
Which brings us then from the Northern Territory into the Richmond area, and some of the I've been blown away by the history, and I was just told that this was actually the first edition. So I need to get an updated version sometime soon.
Oh, Rick Kennedy's a wonderful friend of ours. Yeah, and that's a great book.
Matt, and that reminds me, I have the flyer here, and I'll put it up on the screen. September 14th, a Saturday, he's going to be here again.
Yes, yeah. And we're celebrating the Walk of Fame, and Bix Beiderbecke will be our musician we're celebrating.
On September 14th.
On that September 14th. And he's been in the Walk of Fame a long time.
Yes.
But back to Richmond, settled by Quakers. But one of the reasons that was attractive to settlers was because of the Whitewater River and the gorge. Well, we're down in a glacial gorge. So the last glacier stopped just north of here and started melting. And the water cleaned out this river valley. And so the river, the Whitewater River down here, is 80 feet below the top edge of the land.
So it really did score out the land when it melted.
Absolutely.
Giving us the Whitewater Gorge.
And that's why they call it Whitewater, because the water's moving a little faster. And new settlers could understand, well, you got good timber, you got moving water, and they could put mills together. So you got sawmills, grist mills, flour mills, and that was the beginning of industry here in Eastern Indiana.
I was going to say that because of a floodplain, because of the gorge, because of the water, you've also got great farming.
Yes, yeah. And then the farmers could get their corn milled and the grist mill and so on.
All powered by water.
Yes, yeah. And then, the market would be Cincinnati or, Indianapolis, that kind of thing.
Meaning that Richmond really is a hidden gem.
Some people call it that. So we have a lot of industry. Yeah. And early on, it was a big industry town. I mean, we had they were making farm implements, lawnmowers, bicycles, besides pianos.
And that was prior to Starr Piano.
Yes.
Or even during the same time.
Yeah.
I'm looking up at a truck of the mobile recording, so I know that there was a lot of industry going on here.
A lot of industry. We had the railroad coming through, and things were made locally. But the Midwest was big as far as production. Once the railroads got developed, you could make farm implements or tractors or pianos and put them on the railroad and send them to the big cities. So, and then you had a lot of new immigrants coming in, particularly in the 1850s, 60s, 70s. You got Irish, you got German, and there's some of these people come with a lot of skills and certainly a strong back to do the work. Yeah.
Well, if you're coming from overseas in Germany, specifically here, you were working. You had specific skills and traits that really brought. It was simple to change. The language was different, but the work was work. Potato famine. We talk about that from the Rice family a lot. It drew a lot of people. The Harsdorf, the Blunchers. It brought a lot of families to the America, first of all, but to the farmland, because this is what we were looking for, and the West was being settled.
That's
anything west of the St. Louis Arch was all brand new. So this was still that borderland between all the new land being established and everybody landing on the shores from the East Coast, from New York.
And particularly the German immigrants, the first ones were stonecutters. They helped with the national road, bridge building over some of the rivers and that kind of thing. The second generation tended to be more woodworkers. Here in Richmond, a lot of them came from northwest Germany, Osnabrück area and the surrounding counties, northwest Germany, and they settled here. And then people who would send letters back to the old country, they say, well, we got jobs for you. We're making cabinets, we're making furniture, we're making pianos.
Which we understand as a family from Souter's Museum and the Souter family. I had family friends and family that worked at Souter's in the northern Ohio area. German family building wood and wood furniture.
Yeah.
Okay, this is starting to hit home to me, even beyond the history of it. Now it's all tying in. So then as far as this specific area, then the woodworking comes in. The roads are established and built. We've got railroads in the woodworking. So the wood then.
Yes. And of course, the importance of the piano in the culture of America. Okay. So this is before electricity is in everybody's home. If you have a parlor, you want a piano there. And the children learned how to play the piano, particularly the girls. It was a cultural kind of thing.
Okay.
So in the 1870s, 1880s, sales of piano was very easy, actually. So what we had were piano retailers from Nashville. The Gennetts wanted to expand their operation. They were piano salespeople in St. Louis and Nashville. And they said, well, let's get in on the making of these things. So they're selling different kinds of pianos, and they discovered that they could make even more money if they get on the ground floor. So they came here to Richmond in the 1890s with $100,000 in their pocket to buy into this company, this piano making company. And the Starrs, who had helped start this in 1872 with great piano makers that they imported here to Richmond from Ohio, actually. But, it's a very labor-intensive business, and it takes a while to make a single piano. And then how are you going to sell it? In your storefront, and you're making pianos in back. So you need investors, like any good industry. And the Starrs were investors, and they had this land, and they built a factory. So things are going on great for 20 years, and they're winning awards at some of the, like the Columbian Exhibition in Chicago, 1893, and in 1904 in St. Louis, those exhibitions. That's how industry got known to the public. Of course, you had stores and stuff, but if you could be at one of the expositions, that was even more important. And then they would give awards away for tone and quality and workmanship and that kind of thing. So we had some award-winning craftsmen who made wonderful instruments. And so the Gennetts came in, kind of the second family in, and with some money, investments. And people were buying pianos in 1990s and 1890s and up 1910. There were more pianos being sold per capita than the population was increasing with the new immigrants.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, so it was just a very hot item, and they were expensive, $500, $600 for a piano. And then in 1906, they started making player pianos.
Okay.
And those are even heavier and more expensive. So those are popular for a while. And Starr was also doing the piano rolls.
Paper rolls.
Rolls for the player pianos.
They would read it, and if there was a hole, it would play the tone.
Yep, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. In the 1910s, phonographs became the thing to get for home entertainment. And the Gennetts decided to change their letters of incorporation and included phonographs and then, of course, records to be made.
So it's funny because I always think of the question, and I laugh about chicken or the egg, which came first. Did the phonograph come before the recording?
Well, here in this company, it did. They were making phonographs. They were making cases, and then the recording came a few years later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was it a spur of the? I often wonder about that. We're selling a phonograph. Why not make the records too? Was that kind of the thought process? And I'm hearing the growth, a business mindset. You've got an entrepreneur that says, I can build pianos. I need investors. Investors step in. And there was a story about Henry watching a wagon coming down through town. I think it was in the book or a documentary. He said, go follow that guy. He needs to buy a piano. So you've got the salesman, you've got the entrepreneur, you've got the business or the investors. And so is it just continue to snowball?
Well, it did. And of course, the phonograph was becoming important in society. And they cost about 1/5 the cost of a piano. So, and you could play different kinds of music and so on. And you still didn't need electricity. They wound up these things.
Oh, yeah.
And put the records on. But, the technology continued to improve. And there was a patent on the recording thing that Victor and Columbia owned. And the all patents eventually expire. And that's when Gennett jumped into the party.
And if I'm not mistaken, that was a long lawyer battle when Gennett jumped into the recording
Yes.
because they had something a little bit different, which allowed them to get into the recording business. It was close enough that it was a patent issue, but the patent expired, so then there was no court case after that. But that was a few years of battling before it dropped.
Yeah, about 5 years when appealed up to the not the Supreme Court, the Regional Court of Appeals, District Court of Appeals, and Gennett
and
won.
they had the money to fight it.
They did
because they were investors in they were selling.
Yeah, this was a very lucrative business, and they had a lot of money. And when Henry Gennett died in 22, this factory was worth $7 million in 22 area dollars. So you can put a lot of zeros behind that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes, in today's money, that was big. And so from our standpoint here at the Unconnoisseur, we're learning about jazz music and recorded jazz music. We're learning just about music in general. We're starting to pay attention to the rich history of where it all came from. The Walk of Fame out here, what are some of those names and who all came through this area? And the business end of records. I guess that's what I'm, as an entrepreneur and a photographer, I always think about that. How did they develop that business? And the book will tell you all of it. Make no mistake, you can get your book online. You can come by the History Center here if you're near Fort Wayne or Richmond. But how did that develop, and what can you share about that or tell about that? Well, you could share everything on it. We've had an hour to talk with Bob outside, so to me, I'm just giddy about all the information that I've picked up this morning.
Well, early on, the record companies, Victor, Edison, and Columbia, were in New York City, and that's where a lot of the talent was. You know, you got Broadway, you've got theaters, people who wanted to be stars went to New York, and so Starr or Gennett opened their first studio in New York City in 1916, and that's when they had the old recording. In other words, the technology at the time was a lateral recording. You know, when the needle went through the record, the older, not as good, was called Hill and Dale. You know, it would go like that. And that's what Starr was using at the beginning, was this Hill and Dale.
Okay.
And certain phonographs would play that, but other ones wouldn't.
Okay.
You see? So if you know, 1 million people are buying these phonographs, they want to get a record that can play on their phonograph. So the best way to go was to improve the technology and go with the lateral recording. So that's what the lawsuit was about. Starr won, and then they decided they're going to open up a recording studio here in Richmond, Indiana, and take advantage of Midwestern talent, which was very important because Chicago in the early 20s was a hub, was the music capital, basically, of the United States. Yeah. They had the musicians from New Orleans and St. Louis, and it was a big city, and you know, there's lots of immigrants into Chicago area from Europe as well as from southern part of the United States.
So Richmond tapped into that.
They did.
Gennett and Starr.
Easy to just get on the railroad, get on the train,
which
and come down.
Is running just 60 yards back here. The main tracks would have come through town right up the hill here.
Yeah.
Which there's a switchback out here to bring supplies. What was it called?
Well, a switchback.
Switchback.
Yeah.
So going from the Chicago, and then things start to get recorded here. But
yeah. So there's a retail outlet for Starr pianos on South Wabash, and just a couple blocks away is speakeasies and where musicians are playing. And then, of course, on the south side, there's bigger dance halls and black and white music being played in Chicago. And you know, the Fred Wiggins, the store manager at the Starr Piano store in Chicago, knew that this was good, and he also knew that they wanted to start recording here in Richmond. So New Orleans Rhythm Kings came down here to record in 22. 6 months later, King Oliver and a Creole jazz band was here in early 23, and then they came back in October of 23. And his second cornetist was Louis Armstrong. So these records were going out and then sending out, and to cities around, and the kids were just gaga over this new sound, which was a regional New Orleans sound, but then became a more national sound.
All from this hub.
Yeah.
Because you could pick it in. And we talk a lot about jazz music being segregated at the time. Richmond was one of the few places that didn't care.
No, they were more interested in the green dollar.
And that's what I read in the book, and that's what I heard in the documentary. It didn't matter what color as long as it was green.
Yeah.
And it starts to hit home when we drive in the industries that are here, and then to hear that they're really just investors. So much of the area was investment. It was money. Mm-hmm. If it can make me money, let's do it. And German immigrants already understood the battle of being here. And I won't get into this, but Richmond was a big hub for another battle between race. And German immigrants were here as well, but I would say they were German immigrants.
Yeah.
And so it probably didn't matter at that time.
These 100 American percent people that you might be talking about were just immigrants from a generation or two earlier. And, somebody had an accent or whatever. They were kind of discriminating. So this is the time of Jim Crow. And that's not just Indiana. That's all over the United States, of course. So opportunities were provided to black and white musicians to record their own music here in Richmond and go on with their successes.
Yes. And Matt and I, we've talked about it outside of the channel, but there's the stories of the black musicians coming in at night, recording overnight, and then leaving before anybody really ever knew they were here. Then you had integrated music being recorded here, or you had Ferdinand Jelly Roll Morton, who got to stay at the local hotel.
A couple of the New Orleans jazz people were with him, and of course they stayed at the hotel, and they said, "This is our fellow musician, and he's Creole." And they didn't know what a Creole was, Your
but he
room's right over here.
He wasn't black, so he could stay.
Yeah. So a lot of Creole musicians. They're just people of color, but slightly different. And the history of New Orleans is totally different than other places.
Yes, absolutely. Bringing us to the Richmond. So is there anything in the history that isn't in the books that's relevant to you? I know that you've been a part of this for so many years. You've probably interviewed hundreds of thousands of people, and you've heard all the stories. And I know that Hoagy Bix Carmichael is somebody that you've talked to. I know that so many other musicians have come here to celebrate, and Bix is being honored on September 14th here. What are some of is there behind the stories that you've never told or shared or would be willing to share with us?
Well, I'll share with you anything I know. But, musicians, whether they're educators or they're performers, some of them just, when they're traveling across country, they just get off the highway and check this place out. I mean, I would be sitting down at the office and some musician from Washington, D.C. stopped by, and he was a big fan of Cole Porter and Hoagy Carmichael, and had CDs out there, and he just wanted to see the place. Or musicians from or teachers from Berkeley in Boston, they said, "I've been teaching about this stuff for 25 years. I just had to see the place." So they come down into the gorge and they get quiet. And they look around,
but like I did.
It's hollowed ground. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had some musicians from New York City a number of years ago, and I was talking to and Dan. One of them was on the telephone, and later I asked him, "Well, who are you talking to?" He says, "Well, I had to tell Leon Redbone I was down here," and he said, "Well, get a picture under the bird," So Leon had been here a few years earlier, which we didn't know about. He has since passed away, but he was big into the old music and so on. So there's just things just happen, and people know about Richmond and Gennett, and Armstrong recorded here, and there used to be more spare bricks around, and they would pick up a brick and they want to take it home.
Mm.
This was here when Lewis recorded.
So in other words, this 6-story building used to be here, but everybody took a brick with them, and now it's 2 stories.
There were 25 buildings here. That's right.
20. Yeah, that's what I learned a little bit ago. 35 acres and 25 buildings.
Yep.
And
700 employees.
700
making
employees.
phonographs, records, and pianos at the height. Yeah.
Wow. So on that Walk of Fame, who is your favorite artist out there?
Well, I got a lot of really good ones. Louis Armstrong, of course, is number one, but Bix is right up there.
Yep.
And they were buddies. They were similar in age. They both first recorded here, and one is more of a hot player, a loud player, Armstrong, and the cool jazz or the lyrical sounding Beiderbecke. Mm-hmm. Beiderbecke's life was much shorter.
Yes.
Armstrong was a world icon. And they all started here, you know. It's like, where's the rookie card from? The rookie card was from here.
It was from
Rookie Record.
Ooh, I like
That's
that.
Right.
I'm gonna use that. The rookie card.
Yeah.
It all started here.
They're more valuable than the 10th
yes,
card
they are.
had. Yeah.
And who? I know that there's room out there for more medallions. Can you give us a heads up on who's coming?
No, because I don't know. I don't know. There's plenty of good ones, like Earl Father Hines. He should be He should be inducted.
Yeah.
You know, he played with Armstrong, had a long career. Betty Lou Williams, another Pittsburgh person.
Come on.
You know, we could use another woman in the Walk of Fame.
Yes, we could.
We really should. And she was such a long talent. And she recorded for Gennett. So did Earl Father Hines. I'm not telling people that haven't been here. Father Hines was 19 years old when he played here. Yeah, when he recorded with Louis Depp. Yes.
So as we're going to wrap this up, but I want to just point out who and why is the first medallion outside of this building.
The first one on the walk is Hoagy Carmichael, because he's a Hoosier. He wrote Stardust, which was probably the most recorded song by more different people in that century than any other song. And he wrote a couple books. He idolized Gennett and the Gennett Record. And he was a great friend of Armstrong, great friend of Beiderbecke, and he had a long career, wrote some great music, and he wrote Stardust, recorded Stardust here in Richmond.
Right here. Anything else that you want to share before we wrap this up?
Well, people should come and visit. We got some murals around town of musicians, including Hoagy Carmichael. It's a nice place to see. It's kind of free. Our September 14th will be free music, and we'll be playing the classic jazz from the 20s.
What an incredible time. Bob, I can't thank you enough for opening this space for us to come and drool all over it. What an amazing time. And I appreciate more than anything the history walk down the medallions. And from the standpoint that the Unconnoisseurs are learning the history of jazz, the history of music, and we came up playing piano. So we understand what a piano can do. We understand now where it came from a little bit better. So I'm going to cry. I'm going to end it with that. Thank you for your time and energy. And we'll have you back up in a little bit as we switch gears from the album that we're going to talk about into the recorded music end of things. So thank you. I appreciate it greatly.
You're welcome.